All right, welcome to the Krueger Show, June the 8th, 5 o'clock on the West Coast, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Hope everybody's having a phenomenal day. Warm day here in Walnut Creek. And we're talking 49ers with one of our favorites, Jesse Naylor, stopping by. Niners minicamp has come to a close. That means there's 40 days roughly between now and training camp. And this is when the separates the men from the boys, who can actually come up with content for 40 days as absolutely nothing is going on. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. There's always something going on. But interesting mini camp, and Jesse's here to help us break it down. Good to see you, Jesse. How are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Larry. It's very, very good to be back. I love coming on this show. We always chop it up and do a good job. And, we always come at it from different angles, which I really enjoy as well. So it makes things interesting.
No doubt. So what is June the 8th? Well, it's starting to warm up here in Northern California, but we had thunder showers the other day. What's June in the part of Florida that you're in? You're in the Tampa area?
Tampa area. Yeah. So it's same thing. It's starting to get humid,
okay.
Starting to get some thunderstorms, that type of stuff. Summer, it's interesting because, everybody always vacations during the summer, but I always tell people avoid here from June through September. The rest of the year is when you want to come because it's beautiful, it's sunny, it's clear. But this time of year, you get a lot of rain, a lot of thunderstorms, a lot of humidity.
Favorite city in Florida?
Ooh, I mean,
do you go?
I've been to Jacksonville. I've been to Miami.
Do you go to those places? Do you go to Miami? I mean,
yeah,
it's a different world, right?
Whole different vibe. Yeah, I've been to Miami, Jacksonville, Orlando, and a few other smaller cities. I really do love Tampa. I think Tampa to me is one of those spots that people are starting to figure it out. But when I moved here 5 years ago, I feel like nobody really knew just how nice Tampa was.
And do you guys do water sports and get out on the water on the bay, or is it, Jacksonville also is right there on the water, right? Obviously Miami's on the water.
Yeah, well, we're on the Gulf side. So the Atlantic side, you get a lot more waves and it's a little bit choppier water. The sand is a little bit grainier here. Sand feels like powdered sugar on your feet. And the water is warm almost all year round because you're right up on the Gulf, like the Gulf of Mexico. It's just a different vibe over here, man. It really is.
Well, glad to have you. And D-Pieces, Larry and Jesse have great content. And seriously, Jesse, we love having you on because you always bring it, and there's always, we do get in some really good conversations. What was your thoughts on minicamp? I titled this stream "What We Learned from 49er Minicamp." There's a bunch of little revelations and little observations. What was your major takeaway? If you said there were, your big theme of the 49er offseason, OTAs and minicamp, what stood out to you?
I would say not only the theme of minicamp, but the theme of the offseason, really, Larry, is as much as we think things have changed, they've really kind of stayed the same. And what I mean by that is there's been a lot of conversation. Obviously, the driver to all of our channels is when you put a quarterback in the thumbnail and you make a quarterback topic, you know that your views are going to go crazy. And there's a lot of different angles that you can attack this situation depending on the day and what's going on around the 49ers. But the reality of the situation is, as long as Brock Purdy is healthy, he's going to start game one. And that's really all that it is. All the other stuff, all the other noise, is Trey going to get traded? Is he not going to get traded? Who's better between Sam and Trey? And now you've got Allen into the mix. None of that really matters. It was really all Brock Purdy and his health. That's what it comes down to. And that's what we're going to see in training camp. How quickly can Brock Purdy get fully up to speed? When can he start practicing in situations where he's actually going to be competing? And how quickly can he get ramped up and ready to go for week one? I feel like that was the overarching theme of the offseason. There was so much movement, but really nothing changed.
What's your theory or feelings about camp stats, OTA stats, mini camp stats? I'm looking at Jack Hammer. He's got 49er quarterbacks during the full team periods through 2 open OTA practices and 2-day minicamp. He's got Trey Lance at 12 of 21, 2 drops, 1 pick. He's got Sam Darnold at 11 of 19 with 2 drops. He's got Brandon Allen at 6 of 13 with 1 drop. How much credence do you put in the camp stats?
I mean, for somebody that's not there, I enjoy it. Definitely look forward to it, but I don't necessarily. I don't know. I don't live and die by it. To me, it's practice. You never know what they're practicing. It's interesting because you'll see things happen, and then there's so much context that goes into it. So I'll give an example. I think Grant does a great job of like keeping order of the stats. He puts them out, but then if you actually watch him when he talks about it, you get a lot of context as to what actually happened. It's like, well, okay, yeah, he was 6 to 12 this day, but there were 3 drops and he made 2 incredible throws, the best throws of the day. And he just kind of breaks it down. You're like, oh, okay, well, that's the context that was really missing on this whole thing. Or, hey, so-and-so threw an interception, but really it was a great play by the defender. Here's what happened. Or the receiver ran his route short. And so there's just so much context that goes into it, much like if you watch a game, Larry, or if you were to see the stats after a game and make a decision on how a player played. But then when you watch the film, you're like, well, that's not like, that doesn't look like what the stats told me. This looks like a completely different game. That's what it feels like. We're just getting the box score and we have to make a decision based off the box score. But most of the context is out the window. We have no idea because we're not there. So it's really hard to decipher and make a decision, good or bad, on anybody based off just statistics.
I mean, not to mention that it seems like everybody's statistics are a little bit different.
Correct.
That always makes you kind of pause. Second of all, I'm out there in the field. I don't know how these guys do it. I mean, you're standing there, you're trying to watch. How do you watch how effective everybody's looking on a play if you're worried about jotting down on a notepad your stats? I never take out a pen when I'm out there. I let my eyes tell me, and I'm not looking for stats. I'm looking for dramatic, explosive movement or big plays, which I will remember. I don't need to write it down. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. Here's the other one that okay, so let's say you're Trey Lance and you're running a pass play, and it's a bootleg pass play, and you carry out the bootleg. Maybe it's a play action bootleg, and you carry out the play fake, and now you roll right and you plant your feet, maybe or maybe not, and you kind of survey the field, and you look at a receiver, and then you don't throw it, and you look at another receiver, and you pump, and then you tuck it away, and you run 4 yards out of bounds. What's that?
Right.
What is that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, What is that? I mean, it's not an incompletion. It's not an interception. It's not really, I don't really see anywhere in any of these stats where it says ran for X number of yards. It's like it didn't happen, right? It's basically like a non-play. And in reality, it doesn't matter who's making that play or not making that play or what quarterback we're talking about. That's probably a huge negative play because I don't think they're designing a run. Basically, what happened there is the window opened, the window closed, maybe another window opened, it closed. You weren't decisive, or you didn't see the window in the proper timing, or you just didn't throw the ball for whatever reason. You saw a defender there, or, and then you tucked it away and ran 3 yards out of bounds. And then they go to the next play on the script and nobody says anything about it at camp. But how is that reflected in the stats? To me, those plays are the ones that are probably the more negative than the interceptions. And yet we don't really, there's no accounting for that play. And that could be one time over camp, or that could be 5 times every day in camp. And it's like, it's unaccounted for. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I'm like, okay, so where does that factor into the stats?
Right. And I agree with that. I think and that's where the context comes in and really hearing what was said. So I'll give you a good example. Grant, the other day, I think it was the second day, he had put out the stats, Trey threw the interception or whatever. And then he goes on a show and he starts talking about what actually happened. And he's like, what's not going to show in the stats is that Sam Darnold was, in my opinion, would have been sacked 3 times. He was just holding the ball too long. And
Right.
player comes around the edge, Clelin Ferrell, I think it was him all 3 times, basically, taps him or gets by him and has to stop. The play continues. So he may have a completion on that play, but he actually would have been sacked because he didn't make a decision quick enough. And so those are the things that are more important, kind of to your point, than actual completion percentage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. There was, since we're on the quarterback tip a little bit here, before we go back to the mini camp and talk about takeaways, because there were a bunch of takeaways.
Which, by the way, is why I'm going to training camp this year. I have to see it for myself. Like, I want to see these things for myself because I hear other people talk about these quarterbacks and, what they're seeing in practice. And I feel like you can get 5 different sets of eyes on it and everybody does a good job. It's not like anybody's trying to be biased or anything like that. Everybody watches the game a little bit differently. And I respect that. But you could have 5 different people talk about the same practice and you're like, well, I mean, that doesn't jive with what this person's saying. So I want my own opinion on it because I watch the game differently than you or Grant or Lombardi or whoever. And I just want to have my own opinion as to what I think is actually happening in these practices, if it even matters.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there's something to be gleaned. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, right? I mean,
Right.
And there's something to be gleaned. Otherwise, they wouldn't film it and study it, which is what the coaches typically do. But, just so many different ways to look at it. I mean, I'll give you the one that kills me was the one like we all watched all of last year's camp, OTAs, mini camps, training camp. Mm-hmm. And yet literally days before the cut down, people were saying nothing about Brock Purdy. It was still Sudfeld. Well, of course, Sudfeld's going to make it because Sudfeld's got a $3 million bonus and they wouldn't bury the, And to me, it was like, no doubt that Purdy looked great. But then other people then making these really concrete evaluations of what's going on. But you had Sudfeld beating out Purdy and the Niners were, thought Purdy was a slam dunk over Sudfeld for weeks. So I don't know. It's weird. It's like we examine certain aspects of camp to the nth degree. And then other players, it's like they're not even out there. It's like, well, you know what? In the eyes of the media watching last year, Brock Purdy might as well have been a ball boy, because even if he threw dime after dime after dime, nobody was really looking at him. It was like, he doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So, but if Trey did something wrong, it would be like, here's exactly what he did wrong. Or, you know what I mean? And the analyzation of Trey was off the charts, but there was no analyzation of Brock and really not much of Sudfeld because it was just kind of assumed Sudfeld's going to be here.
And I think a lot of it comes down to how do you separate the content side of things from what you're seeing and how much do you want to get into? I mean, last year, people's bread was buttered on the Trey Lance stuff. Everybody wanted to know Trey Lance, how's Trey doing? Just like the year prior, how are Jimmy and Trey doing? And then last year it was perceived that there was no competition really at all. And so everybody just wants to know how Trey's doing and everybody wants to overanalyze that and bicker about that. And so I get it. It definitely changes how you look at things though, and where you're putting your attention and all your effort. No doubt.
This one cracks me up. 49er Daddy. Lance was way better at 11 on 11. I've been out there. I've been out there for every practice. Mm-hmm. If there's a way better anything, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
To me, there's nobody's way better. No, I mean, there might be guys that have a little bit better this or a little bit better that, or maybe, we're better today versus yesterday. But as far as was quarterback A way better, Sam Darnold's not been way better than Lance, and Allen hasn't been way better than Darnold, and Lance hasn't been way better than either. I mean, it's like nobody. It's shades of gray. It really is. It's much closer as far as just looking at it. It's not. It's not like, hey, Joe Montana in his prime, and some guy who's not going to be in the league, and it's like, wow, they're standing there next to each other, and you can really tell these guys. to this point, in my mind, have been comparable. Generally.
Well, I think
Did you?
the other part is too, Larry, is even you guys are getting a snippet. You're obviously getting a lot more than we do, but you're getting 4 practices out of a 12 practice set or whatever
Right.
that is. So
Right.
what are the 49ers trying to show? Are they trying to show anything? Are they dialing it back? We don't know any of those things. You're just seeing a snapshot. So it's like there may be people in the building that are like, man, Sam really showed out and definitely edged out Lance here. Like or vice versa, but you're seeing the 4 practices and based off of what you see, yeah, things are close, but maybe somebody really did pull away. We just don't know because we didn't see those practices. And that's what makes it really hard too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say this. If you wanted to create a narrative, you could. Because there was a play the other day where it was a sideline pass from Brandon Allen down the sideline. It was a flat dime, like right on the hands. Perfect. I've seen Trey Lance I saw him make a play on a fade from about the 15-yard line on what looked like a third down. They had the officials and they're flipping the cards or flipping the down marker. So it looked like a third down pass play where he threw a fade to the corner. It wasn't quite in the corner of the end zone, kind of mid end zone. But man, it was a sea of arms, but it was just a absolute perfect. You couldn't draw it up any better, kind of a pass.
Yeah.
And Darnold's had a couple passes where it's like, wow, look at that. He's rolling left. He flips his hips. He flicks it the other way. The guy's running, being covered, and he hits him on the hands in stride. So it's like if you wanted to clip that, put it out on social media, you could. And people would run with it like that was the story. But in reality, at the end of the day, it's one pass, and they're pro quarterbacks, so they're going to have one pass. It's really more about your consistency than anything. What do you make of the dialogue around Brandon Allen? I saw you kind of push back hard on Greg Papa on his Brandon Allen Brandon Allen, the Niners may like Brandon Allen and he could be the reason they trade Trey Lance. And man, I'm saying it to you because you're here, but you weren't the only one. Lots and lots and lots of people were like losing their mind over Greg saying that. And I was thinking, why is that? And the only conclusion I can come to is that they think that Greg's opinion represents more than just the play-by-play announcer's opinion, that it represents some kind of sourced material coming directly from the franchise. And they're pushing back on that because it sounds like they're using Greg to spin a narrative. I don't know how tied in he is. I don't know his connection as far as what he knows or doesn't know and who he talks to and doesn't talk to, or how privy he is or not to any internal dialogue. But from your perspective, you push back on it. So let me ask you, what was your takeaway from his video that KMBR put out there saying that, kind of just talking it through. Hey, if the 49ers, really believe in Brandon Allen, then maybe that will mean a trade of Trey Lance.
Yeah, I didn't take it. I think a lot of people did take it exactly how you said, where they're like, well, I mean, he's not just saying that. I mean, the smoke doesn't come from anywhere. He's connected to the team. And I didn't look at it like that at all. I really looked at it as his opinion. And the reason I looked at it that way is what I pointed out in the tweet is he's had a lot of really bad opinions that were not even close to true and never came true and were never at all the opinion of the team. And so that's really all I was pointing out. It's like, man, this guy at every turn, I mean, since the beginning, in my opinion, has really tried to just like move on from Trey. From day one, it was like, well, they might extend Jimmy Garoppolo now. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is a really good player and he might be here another 3, 4, 5 years if they can make it cheap enough. And it's like, dude, chill out for a second, and he's kind of done that every step of the way. And so that was kind of what I was pointing out. That was my frustration with it. It's like, I don't think he's giving any opinion of the team necessarily, but I will say this. I don't necessarily disagree with him. Even on my show on Tuesday, and I talked about it. I said, if I'm the 49ers and I've chosen a quarterback, and if I really think that I've got the franchise quarterback in Brock Purdy or Trey Lance, I wish when they got Trey Lance, they had moved on from Jimmy right away. Just removed any sort of issue and given the whole franchise to Trey and just see what he can do. Maybe if they had done that, we would know a little bit more about Trey than what we know now. But the same thing with Purdy. If they think that Purdy is the guy and they really believe that in their hearts, and it sure does seem that way, the way that some people that you would think would be a little bit closer to the team talk about their thoughts on Purdy, then I would move on from Trey. I would remove any hiccup or speed bump out of my franchise quarterback's way that I can. And, I look at a guy like Chase Young that's out there. If Washington wants to do a Chase Young for Trey Lance swap, and I believe that Purdy's my guy, I'm probably making a trade like that. And I'm probably not hesitating. So I don't necessarily disagree with the premise that he came up with. Hey, if you think Brandon Allen's good enough to be a third string quarterback and win some games for you if need be, you don't need 4 guys. So you might as well move someone. And if Purdy's your guy, well, then, it would make sense to move Trey. So I don't fully disagree with him. I don't think the 49ers are thinking that way at all, in my opinion. I think that they're planning on keeping all these guys at least until the trade deadline.
Howard Cushland says Papa's been anti-Trey since day one. I don't know that for sure, but I don't know that that's not the case.
Yeah,
I do think that's an interesting observation. One of the things I want to do here is I want to share the screen on a video that was a tweet. It was a tweet from my good friend Ryan Hensley. I say my good friend because he blocked me on Twitter. I'm just joking about that. But I like you, Ryan. Bring me on back, baby. Anyway, he said he tweeted out that Trey Lance shared this on his IG. And there it is. Let me see if I can actually go to the page and actually play it. Have you seen the video? Have you seen this?
Mm-hmm.
You have. Okay, so I could sum it up, but I'll just play it for the people who haven't seen it. And this was on Trey Lance's Instagram, and this is a Steve Harvey segment. Okay, here we go.
Supposed to know. You're not supposed to know. Supposed to know. You're not supposed to know. Life is a mystery. If you take away the mystery and everything was certain, you would need faith. Faith functions best when you don't know. So God often puts us in positions where we don't know to destabilize us from relying too much on what we know. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that was really interesting because it makes you want to analyze what's going through Trey's mind. And is that a reference to the Niners have kept Trey in the dark, but he senses that with, maybe with Jack Cohn working out as a 5th quarterback and Brandon Allen, a 2nd quarterback in Cincinnati, now coming here to be technically the 4th quarterback, and Darnold, who signed here with incentives as last year's starter at the end of the year with Carolina, came here to be the 3rd quarterback. Is he maybe, I don't know. I mean, what was your read on that? We're getting into psychological evaluations and reading people's minds, but one, I thought it was an awesome quote. And but if you think about it from Trey putting that out on Instagram, it does make you think, what is going through the young man's mind? Do you think he's in the dark? Do you think he's in the know? Do you think that they've told him his status? Do you think he hasn't been told his status? What do you think?
I think a lot of people get frustrated when we try to psychoanalyze these things. But reality of the situation is most players will put out a song lyric or a quote like that or a video, and it usually doesn't mean nothing. Right? Like Debo last year, that was a perfect example. It was like, just quit analyzing it. He blocks Grant. He's like, it was just a rap lyric. You're looking too far into it. And then a week later, he's requesting a trade. It's like, oh, so it was just a rap lyric, huh? Like an ill-timed rap lyric? Like, no, they meant something. And so I do think the timing is interesting. No doubt about it. It was essentially right around the time that we knew that Purdy's ahead of schedule and it looks like he's going to start and all these other things. And so I think it was just kind of his way of saying like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen here. Obviously, I wish I had all the answers. I wish I was just the starter of this team or it was my team. But I got to have faith that God has a plan for me. And I think, much like Brock Purdy, they're both men of faith. And, to me, it was nothing more than just saying like, hey, my faith's in God. Whatever happens here, I'm not positive, but my faith's going to remain in God, and we'll see how it plays out here. So I don't think it was anything gigantic, but I definitely think in that moment it's kind of where his mind's at. Like, man, I really, really wish I was starting, or really wish I knew what was going on, but I don't. So I'm just going to have to put my faith in God, like I always have.
Trey's been real clear. He's like, I just want a chance to compete.
For sure. Yep.
But the 49ers have been really clear on their front that Brock is the leader in the clubhouse. Mm-hmm. And Trey publicly, at least, has never really pushed back on that either. He acknowledges that what Brock accomplished last year does kind of put him as the leader in the clubhouse.
For sure.
But if the 49ers don't want a competition, if you're Trey, is that change your mind about wanting to be here? I mean, that Trey was asked the other day when he was on the podium, hey, would you like to be traded? He's like, no. Before the question could even get out, he's like, no. But he also has said he wants a chance to compete. Grant directly asked Shanahan, hey, have you reached out to Trey? Have you reached out to his representative about a trade if you're going to go with Brock Purdy as the number one? Shanahan gave him the very terse no. Seemed kind of annoyed as hell by the question and gave him a one-word answer and moved on. Didn't say that we're not having conversations about it, just didn't say that he's talked to Trey or his representative about it. You know what I mean? So he kept it real, didn't expand on it at all to give anybody anything. He just answered his question, no.
And nor should he. Even if they had extensive conversations, he should say nope.
Yeah. I mean, why? Well, I guess you got to be honest. If you're, well, you don't got to be honest. I don't know. Actually, I don't even really know if you got what's the smart approach, because on some level you don't want to lose control over the whole thing and have it dominate headlines and make everything else a total subplot. And this is the main plot. You're trying to run a football team and there's 53 guys on the roster. You got 90 guys on your offseason camp roster that you're trying to bring this whole thing together. But I don't know. What is your perspective on if you were in Trey's shoes and all you want is a chance to compete, but the 49ers' consistent message has been, we're going with Brock. Then would you privately and publicly have diametrically opposite positions, or publicly you're like, hey, I want to be here, but privately maybe through a representative you're like, hey, if that's the case, that's fine. Let me go. Move me on. I mean, this is your career. It's not. Yeah. This is your entire. For all we know, we only live once. You know what I mean? There's no guarantee that there's a secondary world after this. So you know what I mean? You don't have to get too deep, but it's like your goal is to play quarterback and be a starting quarterback in the NFL. If they're not going to give you that opportunity, and they're open about it, doesn't seem like too far-fetched that he could say, hey, look, I want a chance to compete, but if you don't want to give me that chance to compete, then I wouldn't mind having a chance to go somewhere where I could have a chance to compete.
I think both things can be true, Larry. I think he really could want to be here, but also kindly ask to be traded. Think about it. Like, if this is where he was drafted, this is what he knows. He loves his teammates. He loves Kyle. He wants to be here, but he also wants to be a starting quarterback, or at least have that chance. And so I think if he's asked the question publicly, even then he's not necessarily lying. If they're like, hey, would you want to be anywhere else? No, this is where I want to be. I want to be in San Francisco. That can be true. But then the flip side is, hey, if you're not going to at least give me that chance, I understand. I get it. Brock played great. He's earned it. Not trying to take anything away from him, but I got to get my career going. So let's not make a big circus about it. I'm not going to do anything publicly. I'm not going to make your job any harder, but I'm just kindly asking that you see what's out there for me. I just want a chance to compete this offseason. And if I can't do that here, I totally understand it. I get it. No hard feelings, but try to find me a spot and let's see if we can make something work where I do have a chance to compete. And I totally think that that's within the realm of possibility. I really do.
Yeah, no, I do too. I do too. Michael Monahan said, "You're ignoring my super." No, Michael, I'm not. I'm just trying to have a nice conversation with our guest here. Michael says, "Was expecting more differentiation between Sam Darnold and Trey Lance. Hope Trey Lance would be the clear number 2. Did not hear that this was the case in OTAs and minicamp." I'll say definitively, there was no differentiation, and if anybody paints any, I think they have an agenda. I think Trey is that's the best every time I see Trey, he looks a little bit better, a little bit more accurate, a little bit more. He's having a lot more fun. The ball, he's throwing better spirals every day. He's throwing more consistent. To me, he looks better every time I see him. Darnold does throw a very good ball, but I don't. But other than he throws a good ball and he's got a nice deep ball with he's thrown a couple nice deep balls. His timing sometimes is a little off, and it seems like as the reps go on, his accuracy wanes. If there's any common denominator or any theme that I've seen of these practices, is that as the practice goes on and as the linemen come on the field and as there's a little bit more pressure around the quarterback's feet, his accuracy seems like it diminishes as the practice goes on. That's the only thing I could say. So I don't see a clear differentiation between the two. I think if we're going to see that, we're going to see that in preseason. You know what I mean? In preseason, when they're out there, I think you'll see, if some separation, because then it's not practice. It's not quite as controlled environment. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but in practice, the only themes I see is that Trey, some of Trey's misses are way worse than any of Sam's misses, but then Sam's overall accuracy, if there's any consistent theme, seems like it suffers a little bit as practice goes on. What do you make of it? I don't know, but those are the only two observations I would have. Otherwise, they're both about 6'3", 6'4", throw pretty good, drive the ball with some velocity, pretty much on target. I'm not seeing it's not clear. It's not. There's not. The only thing that's clear is that Brandon Allen's arm strength is not in their caliber of arm strength.
Right.
He does throw some wobble balls too. I mean, he's had a couple balls in the last couple practices that were really, high speed wobbles, very difficult to catch. But then also he's had some dimes where it's just been like, wow, who threw that? It's like you see the pass, you're watching the drill, and then all of a sudden you're focusing on the receiver, and then you got to go back and be like, that was a flat dime. Who threw that? Oh, it was Brandon Allen. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. But it's that to me is the only thing that I can take away from practice is that Trey hit the back wall one time, and he missed a guy by a ton. One time he hurled it into the ground. So his misses have been, he's missed by more, but I would say Darnold's probably missed more often. So I don't know. You know what I mean? It's 6 of one, half dozen of another, and you know what I mean. It's just very comparable, and I don't see a real separation in that competition at all.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is basically what everybody else has said. It's interesting because this is the best that Trey's looked. That two themes have come out of this thing. This is the best that Trey's looked. Everybody's echoed that. But the difference between him and Sam at this point is not very big. And this was kind of my concern going into it, that a lot of, I don't know what the 49ers are thinking. And I would assume, like, let's say Purdy doesn't play week 1. Okay. And they're trying to figure out, who do we play? Before this whole thing started, I could definitely see a scenario where Sam Darnold's good in practice. He's been around for longer. He knows how this goes. He's a veteran. And he's not a horrible player by any means. He's got talent for sure. So I could see a scenario where he's, right there with Trey. To me, if they're even, then Trey's got to be given the nod. because you don't know what you have in Trey from a game standpoint. But the fact that you would even pull starter reps away from Trey for Sam Darnold and a guy, regardless of how they practice, for a guy that we know much more what Sam Darnold is than Trey Lance. And the investment in Trey Lance is much higher. So the fact that you would even open up Pandora's box there, that's kind of where my issue came in. But this thought that Trey Lance was just going to come in and blow Sam Darnold out, who's a veteran, who has a ton of skill sets himself. I mean, I don't know if there was ever a world that was really going to exist. I think if that was your thought, then maybe going into it, your expectations were out of whack, at least in my opinion, because my expectations were always, yeah, I bet you this thing could be close, but does it really matter? Does that mean you should even consider going with Sam Darnold? Does that even mean that you should give reps to Sam Darnold and take them away from Trey? Absolutely not. So that was kind of my expectation going into it. So I'm not surprised by anything.
The other thing that is, and I won't throw anybody under the bus, but somebody asked Steve Wilks at the end of yesterday, which was the final day of the final minicamp. Training camp is next. If they've done their installs yet. And Steve looked at him like, oh yeah, we did the installs in the first day. We installed on the first day and we just been reinforcing it ever since. And it was such and I don't remember, and it doesn't matter who asked the question, but it's such a revealing disconnect between you don't know what you're watching. You're so far removed from, you don't realize that he's got a defense. They're making calls out there. They're communicating back and forth. We're right there. I mean, that to me was like, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's amazing that there could be media people who would think that you would not install your defense or your offense before training camp. None. I mean, then what do you think all this is? So that was like, and I'm not ripping the guy because it's, what the hell, but I'm just saying that the people that are reporting back on what they're seeing don't even realize that an offense and a defensive game plan, not game plan, but an offense and a defensive plan overall for the season is not being implemented the entire time we're out here. And they're asking if it's still to come in training camp. And Steve looked at him like, oh, no. We did that in phase 1, and we're now getting ready for training camp. I mean, these guys already know the offense. They know the defense. And we've asked questions of other players where they've talked about, different aspects of things, kind of revealing that fact. And I don't know where that person was. So I'm just saying that there's a lot of people out there covering this that are there and they're watching it, but they're not really there. You know what I mean? They're like so far away from football and pro football in the process that they're not really understanding 100% what they're watching. Not to be critical, but I mean,
definitely.
That's very revealing. Is that not revealing?
I think it's super important because it's funny because I think that there's a lot of perception that goes on with these things. There's a lot of perception on hierarchy, and the hierarchy would go like this: for people that are analyzing, ex-player, media member that's nationally credentialed and maybe hooked to the NFL, then local media, then like fans, right? Like that's kind of the hierarchy that people would look at. But reality is, I feel like everybody's on a level playing field. I mean, yes, there are things that you guys are privy to, but that doesn't mean that you're the smartest guy in the room, right? Like just because I have a YouTube channel doesn't make me smarter than 99% of my chat, just because somebody's there doesn't make them smarter than people that really know how to break down film, but they're just not able to see what you're able to see. And so I don't know, man. I feel like it's not rocket science, it's football. And everybody's entitled to an opinion. And my biggest thing is, as long as you can talk about it intelligently and you can point to plays or things that you've seen as to why you've got your opinion, then your opinion's as valid as anybody. I'll give you an example, Larry. So have you seen the Twitter spaces? Have you seen like people just go into these Twitter spaces and have open conversation and dialogue about whatever?
I mean, it's just basically like just a way to broadcast through Twitter, right?
Right. It's like a big open chat room essentially.
Right.
And you've got hosts and they can bring people up and have conversations. So there was one that I was in, this was like 6 months ago, and Antonio Cromartie's in there. And he gets pulled up, and I was on the panel. We were having conversation about quarterbacks and whatever. And Antonio Cromartie comes up, and he gives what I thought was an outlandish opinion about Kyler Murray and where he ranked as far as quarterbacks. And so I pushed back on him. And I pretty much everybody in that room felt like I put him in a box, and he didn't know how to answer the question. But because he's an ex-player, he's supposed to know more than me, right? But that's not necessarily the case.
There's bias. I mean,
of course there's bias.
Closer you are
and you're this. Yes, exactly. I mean,
I hate that guy. He beat me in college. Whatever.
Right. Or the NFL top 100 list is a great example. Every once in a while, you see the cards where the people fill out their top 10, and you're like, what? Like, that's your top 10? How is Patrick Mahomes not in your top 10? You know what I mean? So it's like, yes, these players have bias. Yes, these players look at the game differently. Like, nobody's on this astronomical playing field when it comes to analyzing football. Some people are better at different aspects. Some people are really good at looking at certain position groups and knowing who's going to be good and who's not coming out of the draft. Some people are really good at breaking down film and telling you why this play is what it is and why it's designed that way and how it should work. Everybody has their different strengths and weaknesses.
Totally.
And everybody brings something to the table, regardless of where you stack up in this thing.
Totally. That's why I try to stick to only things that have nothing to do with meetings I'm not at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I try to stick to explosive athleticism, balance, agility, quickness, things I can see in my mind's eye, and I can compare to other players I've seen, because I'm not in there for the installations. I'm not in there for the offensive teaching points. It's people that criticize players and coaches without knowing what, like Greg Cosell would be so fantastic. We'd have him on and he'd be like, Larry, I can tell you what the norm is around the league, but I don't know what the 49ers coaching point was on this particular play, or how, let's take Steve Wilkes, for example, because he's the defensive coordinator, how Steve Wilkes wanted his defensive backs to play a certain kind of play. I don't know the coaching point. I know generally what it's done around the league, but I don't know exactly. And it does vary from team to team. And so he'll just stay away. He'll beg out. You ask him a question, he'll be like, I can't answer that because I don't know the coaching point on that. So there's times to kind of beg out. And then there's other times where you could take an educated guess. And then as long as you admit, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, it's just a guess because I have no idea what they're instructing their players to do in this situation. Heck, I've been in coaching rooms where we're watching film and the linebacker coach gets up and throws a blow on the defensive backfield coach because there's a difference of opinion in whose responsibility it was. And one guy says it's not me, and the other guy says it's not me. And it's like, wait a second, that's not what we talked about in July, And all of a sudden now stuff, dip cups are flying and hands are being thrown. And, it's just, there's a lot there. There's a lot going on there.
For sure.
There's there's a lot more there than meets the eye. That's all I'll say.
Right. Well, like, I'll give you an example. So like the Cromartie thing. Yeah. I would never challenge Antonio Cromartie on what is good cornerback technique and what isn't. I wouldn't enter that area with him because I know that I'm outmanned. There's no way I know as much about technique of playing the cornerback position as Antonio Cromartie. But if we're talking about quarterbacks that he never played against that live in today's era and who's better than who, absolutely, that's somewhere that I feel very comfortable, and I feel like my opinion is just as valid as his is.
Well, it could be more because you don't have built-in bias where he does. In certain situations, it could be.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
I mean, they could play, there's a lot. I mean, you see it with the way players rank other players. I think in the NBA, I mean, I think of players seemingly have this disdain for Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah,
he's a tremendous player. He's a tremendous player. To hear some players talk about him, you think he's totally garbage.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? This guy's a 7-footer. He's super skilled. But there's something they don't like about him. And then maybe that becomes a prevailing wisdom. And then all of a sudden you've got people kind of ranking him lower than he probably ranks. MGM Production says, what dates are training camp? How does the ticket situation work? First come, first serve. How many people attend? I'd love to go this year. It's on the Niners website. I'm not sure of the exact dates. I couldn't
I don't
quote
think the
them for
dates
you.
are out yet, unless
Okay.
I'm missing something.
And the ticket situation, I don't know. And it's not the same for every organization. And some teams, it's free, but you have to sign up. Other organizations actually charge and make money on training camp. And I do think it's a first come, first serve type situation. So like find out when they're going to be available and then be online probably. And there's limitations.
I want to say with the 49ers, first of all, I don't think the dates have been announced yet. But they should be very soon. If not, maybe they have been.
And it's fun. I would definitely encourage you to go because it's
for sure.
It's low key and tons of fans and it's exciting and the players get into it. The Niners have their rookies come out and try to entertain the fans before practice for a few minutes, and that is always entertaining because some guys are hams and and love it. Other guys are like real, like this is like the scariest moment of their life.
Yeah.
Like Drake Jackson came out last year and started doing cartwheels and flips and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? This guy's 265 and he's doing flips. Other guys kind of running around like, as soon as this is over, I'll be happy. So
I want to say that the 49ers charge $5. And the reason that they do that is I think they give it all to charity.
Okay. Charity, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, I think they give theirs to charity. And then they give season ticket holders first stab at it. They give them like a 48-hour hold. And then after that, it's open to the public. Yeah.
Yeah, it is cool though, and it's fun, and it's kind of like spring training. Everybody's going to the Super Bowl in July, so it's like there's no downside. Connor Lambert says, "What does it take to get a media badge?" That's a good question. I don't even know. I mean, some affiliation, but not everybody. There's some people that have like podcasts that are out there. If you work for a news, generally the old media has like when I don't mean like older people, I mean like radio, television, print seem like they get the credentials more so than people that have a podcast or a YouTube channel. But that's also, I think, on a case by case basis. I don't know. I really don't know. For me personally, I got it for years at the radio station. I got one with a newspaper. I've been doing it. I've been working at 95.7 The Game. So my credential says 95.7 The Game. So I don't know, but you can contact the media relations department at your local team and ask them. And there's a process. I know right now there's a form that I think there's a July date or some June date where you have to register by. And then they'll give you a pass for camp. And sometimes they're really militant about it. And sometimes they're, some teams are, I think, I'm sure the ones that have lots of media are probably more stringent. The ones that have smaller media contingents are probably more liberal as far as issuing credentials. All right. What outside of the competition? I mean, is there an end game on this, or have we already seen the end game? Somebody brought it up the other day. Has the competition already ended? And I did a whole video on it, and I'm like, well, I would like to think no, because Trey's only played 4 games. Sam Darnold is a totally unproven entity. Brock Purdy's coming off a fairly serious injury. Brandon Allen was a backup with another organization. I got to think that it's not over. But then I've seen people say, well, if they're just going to make Brock the starter based on what he did last year, then it is over. So I'll throw it to you. What do you think? Is the quarterback competition over, or is it? Are we even going to get a real quarterback competition, or is it just a charade? And it's Brock's your 1, and Trey's the 2, and Sam's the 3, and Allen's the 4. And nothing in practice is going to change that hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my personal thought has remained pretty consistent that nobody's going to actually take the number one quarterback spot away from Purdy. The only way that somebody else other than Purdy starts is if Purdy does something. And maybe that something is out of his control. Like he's just not ready to go. Like that's one thing. Or he is ready to go, but he just looks awful. Like this is not the same Brock Purdy we saw last year. He's throwing picks left and right. He's not confident. Something's clearly off. Then in that scenario, I could see somebody else starting. But outside of that, I don't feel like there's anything that any other player can do, no matter how great it is, to override what we saw on the field with Purdy. And I'm fine with that. I think that's probably the way that it should be. But then there's another side of it, and I've shared this in brief little things, and I'm not connected to the franchise. Like I don't know anybody that works for the organization, but I do hear things, and these things tend to be right when I hear them. And a lot of that has conflicted. Like, hey, there's actually more of a competition than what you think. And so I have to keep an open ear to those things. But my personal opinion is I don't believe there is an open competition. I really don't. I think as long as Purdy comes back and he's healthy and looks anything like he did last year, I mean, how do you realistically give the job to anybody else? That would be hard to do. So I think it's over as long as he's healthy.
Where are you with Kyle Shanahan in the standpoint of do you think Kyle Shanahan's a good teacher? Do you think Kyle Shanahan is a good quarterback coach? And I ask this because Sam Darnold came here to be number 3, I guess, at least on paper. We'll see if he winds up being number 2 or number 1. But he came here, and before free agency even began, he came here. And Joe Burrow's backup, who was one Joe Burrow hit away from starting for the Bengals, came here to be a number 4 quarterback. So why these guys, if Kyle Shanahan isn't a good coach or not a good teacher, why are these guys, and we have a comment in here, somebody's like, Kyle Shanahan gets his quarterbacks hurt all the time. Yeah, here we go. This one. Nesto. Kyle Shanahan doesn't have a good track record of keeping his quarterbacks healthy. Okay, if we're taking that as a real precedent, we'll take that premise as fact that it's Shanahan that it really doesn't, that he's the reason their quarterbacks are getting hurt. If Shanahan coach quarterbacks get hurt and he doesn't coach the position particularly well, why are these guys coming here then? Are they coming here because why? I mean, it's the West Coast. They're coming here because they want to pay California taxes. Are they coming here because of Debo and Ayuk? Are they coming in Kittle? The weapons? Are they? I mean, I've heard people say Kyle's not a good coach or not a good teacher, and he gets his quarterbacks killed, and the offensive line sucks. Why are these guys who have seemingly would have other options signing here then?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kyle has a lot of strengths, and I definitely think there's some weaknesses there. Personally, the quarterback situation is interesting. To me, Kyle has this way through his scheme where he makes quarterbacks look as good as they can look. I mean, as long as you understand what he's teaching you and understand the scheme and can play within that, you're probably not going to look better for anybody than you do with Kyle Shanahan. But then the flip side of that is I don't know if these players are actually getting better either. Like if they leave the system, are they better players than what they came into it as? Like they're going to look good playing here, but they're not actually improving as players. That's kind of the feeling that I get. And when you look at small sample size of quarterbacks that have left or came in and then left, it's like, well, they're kind of the same player. Like they looked really good because they had a lot of talent. And Kyle Shanahan is, no matter what you say about Shanahan, he's a master play designer. And I do actually think he's a good developer of players. I just don't know about the quarterback position. And one comment that I can't get out of my head, Larry, is Trey Lance's rookie year. Somebody had asked him about the plan to develop Trey Lance and how do you work through his mechanics. And there's some things that it's clear that he needs to work on. And how do you do that? And he said, we don't. That's not our job. Our job is not to work on those things with these quarterbacks. Our job is to get them ready to play in our offense. All the other stuff you're talking about, that's on them to figure out during the offseason. So, I mean, I think Kyle himself out of his mouth is like, I don't develop these guys. Like, I make sure they're ready to play in my offense and that they're doing what I need them to do. And I'm going to teach them the installs and the offense and how to run it. But as far as mechanics and making them actually better, that's not what I'm here to do. That's not my job. So unless something's changed, I mean, he's kind of said it himself. That's not his job.
It's such an interesting study, isn't it? Because on one hand, Kyle Shanahan's wildly successful. They've been to 3 of the last 4 NFC Championship games.
For sure.
Many of his players just, we'll talk about his ruthlessness as a play caller and how his offense produces points. Jimmy, people think is just the most flawed guy of all time, and yet he made it to a Super Bowl and multiple NFC Championship games. Purdy, a lot of people don't think is all that great, and yet they came 1 win away from him reaching the Super Bowl with him as a rookie when he didn't even play any games before December. I don't know. It's like I'm having a hard time putting my hands around like what exactly, how would you actually rate these guys? Is Kyle Shanahan a great coach? And, in my mind, I kind of feel like Kyle called his own bluff with the drafting of Trey Lance because he took the one thing that he's never really proven that he can do at a high level, which is, coach up a young quarterback. And he took a quarterback that needed to be coached up. And then all of a sudden, we haven't seen that quarterback be able to have success. Now people are kind of pointing at him. He seems like now Purdy comes into the mix. Purdy probably didn't need as much tutelage because of all the experience he had at Iowa State. And it seems like Kyle's really comfortable with Purdy. I don't know. My whole thing is that people say, do you really think that Kyle likes Purdy more than Trey? And I'm like, no, I really don't. I think he really likes Trey. I think it really is all about simply that the 49ers feel pressure to win now and don't feel like they have any time to or any seasons to give away to the development of a quarterback. And they have one guy who needs development and the other guy needs less development. And so they're going with the quarterback that needs less development because his timeline kind of jives with their timeline. I think the rest of it is kind of soap opera kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that he loves everybody the same and he doesn't have preferences. I'm just saying that if Trey were the advanced quarterback coming out of a 4-year program, totally ready to play, Brock had the higher skill set and he just needed a year or 2 in the system to really reach his full potential, I think he'd be going with Trey. Do you agree with that, or do you think that's not the case?
No, I think that the NFL is a selfish business.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's really kind of out for themselves. Yeah. I mean, it's a big reason. I was having a conversation.
It sounds cold, but I think you're spot on.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, everybody's out for themselves. It's, when teams start losing, that's when you really see it. Who starts throwing who under the bus, and it happens every single time. GM and coach are throwing each other under the bus until one gets fired. And it's like, all right, I made it. All right, now I got to start winning. And I think Kyle, I was talking to a friend today about it, and I said, my biggest gripe with Kyle throughout this whole development of Trey Lance is, and I said this day one, get rid of the problem before it becomes a problem. Do what the Patriots did when they got rid of Cam Newton and went with Mac Jones. They should have gotten rid of Jimmy G day one and gone with Trey Lance. And a lot of people would say, well, they made it to the NFC Championship game. They made the right decision. And I say, if you didn't win a Super Bowl, it wasn't the right decision. And we still don't know multiple years later where Trey Lance is at or have really any clue, because that's not the route that they took. And unfortunately, he got injured in year 2, and it is what it is. But Kyle Shanahan at that time, what he did makes a lot of sense when you look at it from the point of being selfish. If they had a losing season and didn't make the playoffs that year, he would have one playoff run in, 5 seasons at that point? 4 seasons? 4 or 5 seasons? 17, 18, 19, 5 seasons. They would have made the playoffs one time. I mean, he may not have kept his job. So he really kind of couldn't have the patience that year. And so he's like, hey, we'll let the kid sit. We'll play him sparingly. We'll do our best to develop him. And then year 2, like once I make the playoffs and I'm good and I'm in a comfort spot, now I can look at this year and say, okay, we can go with the ups and downs of developing Trey Lance because now my job's not on the line. And I think it's really that simple.
If a gun's to your head, is Trey Lance here or traded this year?
Oh, this year, you're not giving me a deadline like week 1. Okay, well, I have 2 different answers.
I won't throw a deadline because to me, the smart move, if you're going to trade him, is to build up his value. Because I'll say this, knowing what I know about the importance of the quarterback position, I personally, if I were John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, would not trade Trey Lance unless I got a significant piece that I thought was going to help me win the Super Bowl.
For sure.
So you mentioned Chase Young. I always want to call him Armstrong. Chase Young. For me, I'm not as big a Chase Young fan. I'm more of a Montez Sweat man myself. But we're talking about the same kind of piece, right? We're talking about a dominant edge rusher opposite Bosa that gives you a really, really dominant offensive, front 4. Then you could play Drake Jackson kind of as your third, as you're off the bench in a rotation. To me, if you could get Montez Sweat and a 4th or 5th round pick, that even seems a little low to me because Montez is a free agent at the end of the year. But if you could get a player like Montez, who could be a dynamic player who gets you over the top and wins you that 6th Lombardi, I would pull the trigger. But I'm not just doing it to so that, there's less smoke from content creators and there's there's less smoke from fans and there's less, I'm not doing it just to make my life a little bit less complicated. I'm only doing it if it makes my football team what I think is significantly better than where I'm at right now. That's my barometer. Otherwise, I'm holding on to him and I'm developing him and I'll play it from there. Where I don't know what the future holds, but that's it. That's my thought on it. There's no way I'm moving off of this player unless I get something big time coming back. That's my bar. Where are you at?
So if you would give me a deadline of week 1, I would say 100% confident he's going to be here. But this is where I start to think that there's a real possibility he could get traded, is up to that trade deadline. If Brock Purdy looks as good or better than what he did last year, and the 49ers are rolling, he's healthy, obviously. Sam Darnold is what you thought he was, and in the fact that you feel like, hey, if he has to play games, we feel really comfortable with that. He's healthy. And you got a Brandon Allen, let's say, on the practice squad or a quarterback there that you're comfortable with as well, and you're 7 weeks into the season and everybody's healthy, I really can see a scenario where Trey gets traded. I can. So I'll say, gun to my head, no, he doesn't get traded and he is on this team. But from week 1 to trade deadline, I really feel like there's a possibility this thing could happen. Definitely.
And what do you want in return?
I mean, I wouldn't trade him. So I mean, if I'm running the 49ers, I'm seeing what I've got in them. I'm running them out there regardless of what I saw from Purdy. I got to figure out what I've got in Trey Lance. Like I'm that bullish on it. But if I'm in the 49ers mindset and they are 100% on Purdy and I'm resigning myself to that being the case, then I mean, I'm looking for a player in return. I don't want a draft pick. I want somebody that can help me this year. And so a Chase Young type player, somebody like that is maybe in a contract year that is talented and plays a premium position that I need, I'm willing to make a trade like that. But I'm not going to do it for draft picks. It has to be a player that can help me win this year.
You would do it for draft picks, but just not a draft pick. is what you're saying. I mean, draft picks could be this Herschel Walker trade, right? I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah, well, for sure. Yes, of course.
I mean,
of
draft
course.
picks.
But
You would do it for
what
draft
I
picks. It's
think
just a
he's
matter of-
worth, what I think he's probably
Yeah,
realistically
what's
worth.
he actually worth? That might be the best way to say it.
Yeah.
If you, in your world, what's he worth?
Draft pick wise, I would say a third rounder that maybe could escalate to a second, depending on playing time and how well he plays. I think that's
one
realistic.
third rounder, just one third rounder,
one single third rounder that can escalate to a second. Yep.
This is where I'm selfish. I wouldn't want to do that for one third rounder. I was thinking on draft day, Michael Mayer. If they could get a high second and turn that into Michael Mayer, now you got a 2 tight end set with Mayer and Kittle. Now you're cooking with grease. And they did go tight end, but I think Mayer's better than the guys they got for sure. But we'll see. Would you do Nesto's trade here? Nesto says Trey Lance to Minnesota for Danielle Hunter. Would you make that trade?
I think that's exactly. I mean, him, Chase Young. I think those are the exact trades that I would be looking at. Yeah, absolutely.
Would you make this one? Third string All Pro, Lance to Atlanta for Kyle Pitts. Play Pitts and Jennings position.
I would
too.
Yep.
Okay.
Which would be really interesting because
I love Pitts.
There was a lot of rumor that if Trey Lance had fallen to 4, and that was a big reason why the 49ers jumped up to 3 specifically, is that the Atlanta Falcons wanted Trey Lance. They really like Trey Lance. So it would be really funny to kind of unwind that trade and realize that essentially what you did was traded 3 first rounders for Pitts. Like that was the trade, because it would be like you had drafted Pitts and then Trey Lance had gone to 4 and just went to Atlanta. That's essentially rewriting the history of that draft. That would be an interesting one.
What last one on the quarterbacks, and then I want to hit a couple other things. Though, I mean, it's hard not to talk quarterbacks because it's interesting. I mean, it is a soap opera of the highest order. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, and it's, I mean, the rest of the team's not dull, but I mean, this is just, it's so unprecedented and so juicy on so many fronts. It's hard to pivot.
Yep.
One last one. Forget the players in that reaction, because the players work for the team and they're going to, no matter what the team does, the players are going to be fine. Right? They're going to be happy, not happy, but they're going to be,
they'll fall in line.
They're not going to, there's not going to be a mutiny no matter what.
Yeah.
What is going to be the reaction from the fan base, Twitter, content creators, media? What is going to be the reaction to a Trey Lance trade if one happens? Will people hold Kyle and John's feet to the fire, and suddenly the heat on Shanahan and Lynch is dialed up like to a level that we have not seen yet? Will people be like, you know what? Shanahan and Lynch know more than us, and that old defer to the power structure. I'm seeing that with the Warriors. Joe Lacob, whatever Joe Lacob does is fine with me. Really? He's about to make his kid the general manager, and who knows who's never done anything. And no matter what he does, you're fine with it. I mean, that's a little too laissez-faire for me. That's a little too hands-off. I have trust, but I don't have blind faith in anybody. So I don't, but what is going to be the reaction generally from non-players if Lance is dealt? Is it going to be like, you're going to rue the day you did this? And there's going to be people who are like rooting for Trey Lance with the Atlanta Falcons, rooting for Trey Lance with the Minnesota Vikings, secretly rooting that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch fall on their face and get bounced. And what do you think is going to be the reaction?
I smiled when you asked the question.
The common denominator of the reaction, because there'll be, obviously there'll be everything. But
of course, I smiled when you asked the question, because I had actually tweeted something similar to this the other day, and saying that, it's interesting because if the 49ers trade Trey Lance, the feeling I get is everybody would be like, yeah, see, he's a bust, and blame Trey. But nobody would hold the front office and the 49ers accountable for making said mistake. Like, let's assume that Trey's a mistake, which, by the way, we still don't know, because if he doesn't play and he gets traded, we're still literally in the same exact spot. We have no clue.
It is
But-
interesting, by the way, that you think that if they traded him, that would, in some people's mind, stamp it official.
Oh, for sure.
See, he's a bust.
100%.
If they say he's a bust, he's a bust.
Yep.
No matter the
100%.
fact that, they could have had Mahomes, they could have had, if they say Trey's traded, then that is official. He is a bust and not good. So they're like, that's interesting too.
I think it seals in a lot of people's mind that he's a bust. And also a lot of people will place that blame on Trey Lance as if he's the one that chose to get his leg snapped in two. I think most people wouldn't hold Shanahan or Lynch accountable for it at all. I really don't. I think that most people would just be like, yeah, I mean, he was a bust. I knew it the whole time. They proved it. I trust in what they're saying. Let's go Purdy. Like that's the feeling I get. I'd say that would be probably 70-75% of the fan base would be my guess.
Trent Baalke with the super says, Larry, these ads in the middle of the stream are a joke. I've got to talk to my kid about figuring out exactly how to turn them off. They can't be just turned off.
You have to do it before the stream starts. There's a check
turn
box.
them off every time you stream.
Yeah, you have to do it for each individual stream, and you have to hit the checkbox for mid-roll while you're live streaming. You can keep the rest of your ads on for like afterwards and whatever, but you have to be specific and you have to do it every time. And sometimes I forget to do it too, and I feel bad. But what do you do?
And if the ad pops up, Jesse, have you been on one where they pop up? Have you seen it?
I have not.
Can you click? Like, can they speed through it? Kind of a thing.
I pay for the YouTube like premium whatever, so I don't get ads regardless. So I don't know. I would assume that
what's that run you, by the way? I
think it's like $9.99 a month or something.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But I get it anyways because it's a part of YouTube TV. So
Michael Monahan says what it all boils down to is never miss with a streak.
Sure. Never mess with a streak. Yeah, that's true. I mean, rally caps for sure.
Oh, as far as like whoever's in there, stay with them.
Yeah.
Michael Monahan, you play Brock till he proves he's not the guy.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, that's totally fair.
I think even Trey might agree that's fair. 49er Daddy. Larry, have you ever taking Ryan out to lunch? Absolutely. Or do you
first
not
of all, they
honor
have a second bet. They have a second bet, to be fair, that we don't know the answer to. So you can't take them out to lunch till they have a double or nothing thing going on right now. So
you know what? If Ryan showed up here right now, I'd say, bro, let's go to lunch and I'm paying whether we had a bet or not.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of guy that if I see you at camp, I'll take you to lunch. You know what I mean? I'm not that cheap where I'm like, I won't spend a nickel on somebody. And it's like, you know what? I ain't rolling that fat, but I'm rolling fat enough for lunch. You know what I mean?
Sure. I got you.
MF says, how's Marcelino looking? Jacked.
Oh,
He's looking freaking jacked. I mean, seriously jacked. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of these other players. This last OTA or this last minicamp had 4 rookies that just flat out shined. And I don't like getting into minicamp rookie performances. That's why I waited till training camp on Brock Purdy for the most part, because I thought Brock looked awesome in the minicamp, but he was a rookie, and I didn't want to put too much into minicamp.
Yep.
But that being said, Deshaun Jameson, the corner out of Texas, is not the biggest guy, but man, that guy's I feel very confident in saying it on the 8th of June. Guy's making the team. He's a dynamic return guy, but he's plenty good enough to play the corner. And you know how valuable, useful corners are in the NFL. And the way the game is played now, you don't need 3, you need like 7. And you're going to carry
an Ambry's spot, in your opinion?
No doubt.
Okay.
No doubt. Jameson breaks on the ball with quickness and with decisiveness, and not only that, he's small, so you think, well, he's not going to be able to make plays against the run. But he comes flying up against the run and he goes super low. So he's tackling everybody around the ankles and calf. He's like one of those guys that just comes flying up from his position. He brings you down, but he doesn't tackle you around the shoulders. He doesn't tackle you around the waist. He's 5'10", 180. He goes low and knocks you off your pins. He is special. I mean, for an undrafted free agent, he had 3 PBUs in the last practice, probably had about 7 in the 2 or 3 practices that I saw.
He
that
gave
I counted.
Allen fits, didn't he?
I mean, the guy is one thing you can't teach is you can't teach the close on the ball. So everybody, 40 time and vertical and 3 cone. And he, by the way, what is one of the most important traits that the scouts look for in a corner? 3 cone. And this guy, what was this guy's number one thing? If you looked at his, his profile, his 3 cone. His 3 cone was outstanding. Deshaun Jameson, I think, is really was a terrific undrafted free agent, and I'm shocked in a league that is a passing league that this guy went 7 rounds. Nobody wanted a 5-year starter at Texas who's also can also be part-time as a dynamic kick returner and punt returner. And I asked the special team coach Schneider about him. He says he looks good returning punts, returning kicks. So yeah, Deshaun Jameson, unbelievable. Jake Moody kicked a 60-yard field goal. I don't know. Maybe it was 58. Maybe it was 61. I don't know exactly, but it was a bomb, and it had plenty of distance. Now, I don't think it's going to be a smooth ride because it's a rookie kicker, and you had Robbie Gould, and Robbie Gould was just a picture of consistency. But this kid's got just a booming leg, and they may. I don't know. I mean, he's going to miss some easy ones, but man, this guy's leg is so special. I haven't seen a kicker. I've never seen a Niner kicker with this kind of a leg. Just a huge leg. Jalen Graham, the linebacker, the 7th round pick out of Purdue, just every day looks great. I mean, and I don't even see any real jobs available at linebacker, but he's making plays. He's hustling down the field. He plays faster than the 4.6. You watch his college film, you can see him making plays. You watch him on the practice field, he looks like a 5-year vet. I mean, it's just he moved. There's no hesitation. He's got great energy. He looks really, really good. And then the running back that they didn't draft from UTEP, Ronald Awatt, in this last practice caught like 3 balls out of the backfield. But it's not just that he's catching it. It's the way that he's catching it. Just this effortless, it's like he looks like a guy who's caught the ball a ton. And I don't watch UTEP football, so I really don't know if he's caught the ball a ton, but he looks like he has. Those 4 guys looked terrific in this last practice. And I'll throw one more, the Spencer Wagee out of North Dakota State. That guy's a player too. I mean, he absolutely looks good. I mean, motor, running 45, 50 yards down the field. He made some plays against the run where he just threw away the offensive lineman and was right there. And of course, he just tagged the runner, and it was Jordan Mason, and Mason just keeps running, and nobody really says anything because it's. But he's basically tackled in the backfield by Spencer Wagee, and then he kind of sifts through traffic and runs 15 yards, and nobody says anything. But those 5 rookies, Awatt, Graham, Moody, Jameson, and Wagee, all really look good. And 4 Jameson undrafted, Graham was a 7th round pick, Awatt and Wagee undrafted. 49ers, they may whiff up top, but man, they do incredible things on day 3. They really do, and after the draft. And we'll see if those guys make the roster. It's a deep roster.
Give me 2 guys, Larry, that were on this roster last year that you think, if you had to bet right now, would not make the team. Maybe not necessarily a huge surprise cut, but just somebody that you're like, yeah, I mean, they're not as good as some of these other players that I mentioned. Just get 2 players.
Flanagan fouls.
Okay.
Flanagan fouls because there's Curtis Robinson, who's a special team backer. There's Oren Burks, who's a special team backer, but Burks can also play from scrimmage. Fouls is not 100%. Then you have Jalen Graham, D. Winters, and Marcelino, and you have Greenlaw and Warner. I don't think they would cut Demetrius Flanagan fouls.
Trade him.
But I think they could trade him for a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick or something. I think he's definitely one. Ross Dwelly. Ross Dwelly's got great hands, but you're not cutting Latu. He was your 3rd round pick, and he's made some big pass plays down the field. And Braden Willis has got this fight. He's like a culture player. He's kind of like a tight end version of Jawan Jennings.
I like it.
And if I got to go with another one, definitely the tight end. Definitely, maybe Ambry.
Yeah.
Maybe Ambry. That wouldn't surprise me.
What
The
about
one,
TDP?
no, he looks really good.
Does he?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, as far as I'm just looking for a little bit more explosiveness because last year he was a little tentative and like he ran a good 40 time, but he didn't play to that on the field. This year he looks way faster on the field. But I don't know how that log jam's gonna solve itself, but he's another guy as a candidate for trade.
What about Mitchell?
Mitchell
he can't stay
Mitchell
healthy.
wasn't out there.
Yeah.
I mean, these are trade candidates, right? Because Mitchell has value.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say Mitchell's not. I'll give you one that I think is gonna would make you go, what? But and if he sees this, he'll probably be like, dude, I'm never doing an interview with you again. But it's gonna be a really tough wide receiver cut. And Jawan Jennings is going to be challenged for his spot. You got to remember this: they're going to have they're going to pay Bosa a mint, so he's going to make so much that they're going to be looking for cap relief everywhere. And Jennings a free agent at the end of the year. You've got Debo, Ayuk. You have Ray. You have Danny Gray, who looks really good. I mean, Danny Gray to me is like the most dynamic athlete on the entire team. He's such a difference maker speed wise. And then you've got, Tay Martin's stronger and has great ball skills. And Ronnie Bell is cheap, but man, as far as contract, but Ronnie Bell's got ball skills. So
and they're working out Ja'Cory Pearson again.
I know. And it's funny. I know him a little bit, so I'm trying to get him on the show if he signs. Yeah. And somebody sent me a thing yesterday as I'm driving down the 680 to camp going, dude, Ja'Cory Pearson's going to try out today. So I know him. So I sent him a note saying, hey, I hear you're trying out today. Is that actually happening? And he's like, yeah, 100. I'm there. And I'm like, dude, good luck to you. But Ja'Cory,
I really like him a lot.
Yeah. I mean, he's an Ole Miss receiver, very explosive, plays like a 4-3 guy. He's tiny, but he's not small. He's tiny, but he's not weak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's just really explosive. So yeah, I mean, I think Jawan Jennings better. Jawan's not a great practice player, and he had a couple drops. I don't put anything in those drops because the guy catches,
everything in games.
Yeah, in the biggest games of the year, he catches everything. But just because he's a free agent at the end of the year, and are they going to pay him? Probably not. So he's going to walk at the end of the year, and they got other possession receivers there. And I don't know. He to me, he's going to be challenged. He's going to be,
and he definitely would bring something back. I mean, even if it's a fifth round pick or something, that might be worth it if they feel like they're really deep in that spot.
I'll give you another one that is kind of not for sure. Kinlaw, yeah. Yep. I mean, I don't know that Kinlaw is for sure going to be on this team. They got all kinds of defensive tackle depth. So, and he didn't practice the last 2 days.
Yeah.
I have no idea where he is. So I don't know. They're loaded. I mean, they're in a lot of ways they're loaded. We got this one from N10. He says, "What happened to Ja'Cory Pearson from the XFL? He tried out. I don't know what happened to him. I know he tried out, and I know he's on the field. He looks like a low 4-3 guy, like a 4-3-2, 4-3-1. Some people think he plays more like a sub 4-3 guy, but either way, you see him get separation on the field against NFL caliber defensive backs. That doesn't happen a lot.
Plus, he's unique. That's what I like about him. He's just unique compared to what else. There's not a lot of players like him in the NFL. And when I look at it, I say, oh man, like, could you imagine if the Kansas City Chiefs got their hands on this kid, what they would do with him? Like, that's the way that I see it. And so then I think the flip side is, well, Kyle Shanahan's really good too, designing plays and kind of getting tricky. Maybe he can do something really good with them. So,
I mean, if the guy really does play like a 4-2-8 guy and he's like has Tyreek Hill type speed, what's Tyreek Hill's dimensions?
Tyreek's a little bit taller. I think he's listed at 5'10", and Jacor's listed at like 5'8", something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, if you have it, the league's different. It used to be, man, you run these, you run these patterns, and every step is key.
Yeah.
Now it's more about big playability and separation, and get the ball in the hands of a super awesome athlete in space and let him, juke one guy and make a big play. And I think Pearson could really, really do that.
Yeah.
Flav says Moody was a great pick. Think it was Jesse's favorite pick of the draft by any team, if I remember correctly. You went off on the kicker, right?
Oh, definitely went off. Yeah, for sure.
I did too. I was like, what? Why?
What are you doing?
Why?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people, they obviously people are going to justify it. It kind of goes back to whatever the organization does, I fall in line, I'm good to go. But
right.
a lot of people are like, well, we need them for kickoffs. Well, then they changed the kickoff rule. It's like, okay. And then it's like, well, we need this booming leg. It's like, well, you kind of need accuracy too. For me, in order for that pick to be justified, he has to be a top 5 kicker for many years to come. Because right now, as far as all the kickers in the league that are starting, he is the highest drafted kicker in the whole NFL. And over half the kickers that start in this league year in and year out are undrafted free agents. So the gap of, Moody to undrafted free agent, he better be really good in order to justify it. That's my opinion on it.
All right, brother. We're going to let you go. Last question. Give me, with a month to go till camp, the one position group that you're really, really excited about. Give me the one position group that you're, I won't say really, really concerned, but you got concern for one group and you got excitement for another group. What are your two position groups?
Man, for me, I would say there's a lot of excitement and just curiosity at running back. I really want to know how that position group's going to shake out, because Mitchell, if he's healthy, is a clear number 2. But again, he really struggles to stay healthy. I think TDP, after watching what they did with Sermon last year, 1 year they were willing to move on. If these other guys come in and they're much better than either of those two, what do they do with that position group? And how do they fill it out behind CMC? And do they look at Jordan Mason the way that I think fans tend to look at Mason, which is like, wow, we really got a really good player here. Sure would be nice to get him a lot of touches and maybe make him the number 2 guy. So I'm curious to see how that whole position group plays out, because I think there's a lot of movement that could potentially happen there. The position group that I have the most concern about would be probably defensive end. Bosa obviously is incredible, but is Drake Jackson just really physically looking better? Or can he actually meet the expectation that I think the team has on him? Looking at it at a surface level, we say, well, right now, I would trade for Chase Young, or I would sign Yannick Ngakoue. We saw Frank Clark go today, finally, to Denver. So these are things that we've been looking at. We're like, why are they have money? Go get Yannick. But the 49ers are clearly trying to hold on to this money until the last possible second to figure out, can Drake Jackson be a guy? And even if he is, what does the depth look like behind Drake and Bosa? The 49ers, at least in the past, really like to rest some of these defensive ends. There are times where Bosa sits out almost a whole series, and you're like, where's Bosa? Is he hurt? Checking your timeline, Twitter. Is anybody saying that Bosa's hurt? Where's he at? Oh, well, he's just sitting out for the series. They need some depth at that position. And so let's hope that Drake Jackson pans out. But if not, most likely that other guy may not be on the roster. So who are they willing to go get? Are they willing to trade for somebody? Are they willing to sign a Yannick Ngakoue? What does that look like? So right now, a little bit of concern. There are some options out there, but I'm curious to see how that plays out as well.
I'm going to say, by the way, N10 says impression of Deshaun Jameson after seeing him live.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't do impressions. No. Actually, I do impressions. And
of Trent Baalke, at least.
Larry, I liked Marcus Lattimore. I realized he had been hit by a bus and that his knee no longer bent. But I thought, you know what? Let's use a 4th on him.
and maybe they'll fire my ass. Okay. No, okay. I would say to answer my own question, I would say I'm most excited about the secondary, just because I asked Wilkes yesterday, Mike, how is the D'Amico D and the Wilkes D, how's it going to look different? I thought he was going to be like kind of reserved and be like, oh, shucks, D'Amico was great. And, we're just trying to get all these, I thought he was going to give me the non-answer answer, or like the non-judgmental answer, like, hey, D'Amico was very successful and I'm very successful. And we'll just, instead he's like, had a concrete answer, and it was kind of biting. It was like, we gave up too many big plays down the field. We gave up too many chunk yard plays, and we're going to come away with interceptions. We didn't intercept the ball enough. We gave up too many big plays down the field. And it was like, whoa. He was like, I mean, it was.
What's funny is
he brought it, man,
because he's a part of the team, but really he means they.
Yeah. He's like we, but he's pointing the finger. I mean, I don't. It wasn't like he wasn't angry at D'Amico or anything, but it was like, it wasn't like, hey, D'Amico's great and everything's all hunky dory. It's like
he thinks he can do better.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we didn't do it here and we didn't do it there, and we're gonna do it this year. And then when we had Demo Lenore on, he's like, yeah, I got to get better down the field. I gave up too many big plays. So I like the new look, kind of the new eyes on it. And I like the high standard of, put a finger in the chest of your players and challenge each one of them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I also like the talent back there. I like Lenore. I like Hufanga. I think Isaiah Oliver's a really nice addition. The guy who I thought was just awesome in the minicamp outside of Deshaun Jameson was Samuel Womack III. Womack is just absolutely primed for a huge year. He is great. I mean, he's not good. He's great. He's going to be really, really good. Jair Brown, Luter, these guys are going to help. I just think they've been an infusion of talent, a new lease on life. And I like the fact that on this defense where there's tons of talent up front, they really invested on the back end. I think their back end of their defense is going to be a surprise. So I'm going to say the secondary is the unit that I'm like, okay, bring it. Let's see what it looks like. I can't wait for it. And I'm with you, man. I'm going to say, believe it or not, defensive line, and specifically defensive end as a concern. Bosa's Bosa. Drake Jackson is looking phenomenal. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. He looks terrific. But Cleveland Farrell, I don't know. Kerry Hyder at defensive end, that's I don't know. Robert Beal, didn't even see Robert Beal. If he was out there, didn't notice him at all. Austin Bryant, I don't know. Alex Barrett, they brought in Daryl Johnson. He jumped off sides on a couple plays. I don't know. And now you got Frank Clark going to where? Where'd you say?
Denver.
Mm-hmm. He's off the market. Leonard Floyd's in Buffalo.
They're starting to go, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, it's like they and edge rushers, it's like you can never have enough edge rushers. There's still some good ones out there, but I'm not satisfied with the defensive ends based on what I've seen. I think unless Drake has a monster year and can play a massive number of snaps and Bosa never gets hurt, I got real concerns. You have one pulled hammy from Bosa, and Drake Jackson has one bad game, and you're staring at, you're trying to ice a game with Austin Bryant and Cleveland Farrell coming off the edge. I just think they're deep at tackle, but they're thin at defensive end, and I got a lot of concern there. That's my one concern. So if you can get Montez Sweat, you can get Chase Young, do it.
Yeah, for sure. Danielle Hunter, yeah.
Danielle Hunter, Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram. There's a few of them out there for sure. My first choice would be Montez Sweat because of the consistency. And I think Sweat's the kind of guy that I think he'd be so good in this defense that they wouldn't just trade for him. They would trade for him and extend him. And I think that would be real valuable. All right, brother, you're the best, man. The one thing, I don't know that I've ever done a stream with you where at the end I felt like, we didn't get a lot done. All right, we didn't, or like, it wasn't that strong. I mean, seriously, your takes are really good. The fact that there's people that love you and rip you in the chat is like, I feel like we have a kinship there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, it's like they're always well-attended streams, and there's, more people love you than hate you, but there's always people in here that hate you. And then I get the same reaction, and maybe that's why it's so familiar to me. But tell us what you got cooking on your channel the rest of the week. Are you done for the night? Are you streaming again later tonight? You what do you got? I know you guys had some family stuff going. I saw a picture of you and your
going on.
A picture of you and your old lady going out the other night. Once again, Overachievers Club.
Yeah, I'm just gonna lay low the rest of the week unless something happens that I really feel like I got to get after. This is like the calm before the storm. Yes, content's got to go out, but this isn't full time for me. So the content slows down a little bit. Got a vacation coming up here.
Nice.
Going to Costa Rica in a couple weeks. So
nice.
I'm just it's chill time. But I promise you, come training camp, Last Second Sports, you're definitely gonna want to be there. I'm going to be doing some cool things. I'll be there live. And, my perspective is always a little bit different. So definitely tap in over at Last Second Sports for sure. Larry, appreciate you as always, man. You're fantastic. I love these shows with you, and we'll do it again soon.
You're good people, according to Rocky Mountain. Now, you got to do some zip lining maybe in Costa Rica?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yes, definitely.
Kids?
That,
you got little
tree
kids?
climbing, everything. Yes. I can't wait.
You got kids too, or no kids?
I do. Yeah. 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old boy. So we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, that'll be awesome, bro. Hey, man, and you're coming out for camp.
Yep. I'll be there.
We'll see you in July, but I'm sure we'll stream before then.
Sure.
Peace. Have a great rest of your day.
You too, man. Later.
There you go. The great Jesse Naylor. I love Jesse because, Jesse brings it, and, he'll go after it on social media. He'll challenge people. And I like that. I kind of like that. You know what I'm saying? I like people that go after it a little bit. All right, let's thank our sponsors. We're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, best barbecue in Northern California. Check them out. Emeryville, Corte Madera, open 7 days a week in Marin.
We grew up with a Sunday dinner. That means no matter how busy you were, no matter where the hell you were, you came to dinner on a Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday dinner without sausage, it's like a church without God. How can you go to church if you don't believe in God? And along with the sausage also became the discussions. That was discussion night. It wasn't a typical family that you sit there and you're quiet, and you don't talk with a mouthful. Oh no, man. Italians talk when they're eating. Italians even talk when they're sleeping. And definitely we talk with our hands. So if we can't express it through our mouth, through our lips, we express it with our hands. So, and that's what sausage is, really. It's an expression, that life is good.
right, coming down the home stretch on the Krug Show, and thank Jesse Naylor. Really fun to talk with Jesse. Jesse's always really good. We're not done. We're not done for the day. That's right. Vish Kumaran's on deck. Vish has got a new gig with Bleacher Report. How about that? Vish and Croc doing some Bleacher Report Niner breakdown. I can't wait to talk to Vish about that. And, of course, OTAs, quarterbacks. We'll do it all. We'll do it live. Do you like my Bill O'Reilly? We'll do it live. One of my favorite. Bill O'Reilly got pissed off at somebody, and anyway, good stuff. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to Jesse. Thanks to all you people who threw super chats our way. Hope you enjoyed the live stream. We're talking more Niners next. Join us.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Careful, whatever you bring me, get in hand.